Okay, so we want to talk about female and male reproduction, and one of the I guess one of the big things that they want you to see is that, before like 20 weeks in um in the fetus, before 20 weeks in the fetus, you can't differentiate between male and female. So we have to talk about the similarities between the two reproductive systems and the differences. Okay, so this is just going to show you the two like homologs, so the things that are comparable between the male and the female. And then we'll talk about all of it. So here's female, right, and here's male. So okay, so the first thing is gonads. Okay, so let's start there. So gonads are the primary reproductive organs. So they're going to make the gametes, which are the sex cells. And I think you probably heard all that before. So the gonads are the ovaries and the testes. Okay, so ovaries in female. Oops. What did I do? Ovaries in female. Female. And male. Okay, now the gametes are the sex cells, so they would be the eggs, right? And the sperm. Eggs and the sperm. Okay, now we're also going to talk about the hormones. So the hormones are like the estrogen and the testosterone, and they're going to be produced by the gonads. And then we'll have accessory reproductive organs. So all of those accessory reproductive organs are going to dump into the gonads, right? And they're going to help us with copulation or coitus, as Sheldon Cooper would say, sexual or intercourse. So the whole point of all of this is to make an embryo. Okay, so what hormones are responsible for initiating puberty? So puberty, they say 9 to 14 in most boys and 8 to 12 in most girls. It begins with the release of gonadotropic releasing hormone. Okay, so GnRH. There is disorder called precocious puberty, which means that GnRH is released earlier than normal. Okay, so the hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin releasing hormone. That's going to travel to the anterior pituitary, and then the anterior pituitary is going to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So that's this is the axis, what's going to happen. Okay, so hypothalamus to anterior pituitary to release follicle stimulating, and then those go to the gonads. Okay, now we start at the parent. We start at the perineum. Okay, so the perineum is not the peritoneum. Okay, so the perineum is the bottom, okay, of your body, I guess. I don't know how to put it. Two big parts. The urogenital triangle is the space between the ischial tuberosity and the pubic symphysis. Okay, so that's the urogenital triangle, and then the anal triangle goes the other direction. So the ischial, so that's like your sit bones down back to your anus. Okay, I'm not worried that you know all of these parts, and I don't know if you have to actually know them for lab, but the two triangles know for right now, because that'll help you in the future. Okay, now gametogenesis. So how do we make the sex cells? How do we make the gametes? Okay, so in females, the eggs are formally called oocytes, and in males, of course, we have the sperm. Okay, so we're going to talk about heredity. So we'll do a quick review. I don't know if you had this in Bio 119 or Bio 99 or not, but okay, so somatic cells are body cells. Okay, so these are all the cells in your body except for the sex cells. oops, I didn't write, except for sex cells. Okay, they all contain 46 chromosomes, so 23 pairs. Okay, autosomes are autosomes are the 22 regular chromosomes, okay, and then the 23rd pair of chromosomes are the sex chromosomes, okay, and we always say the sex chromosomes are the X and the Y. Okay, so that's considered the 23rd pair. The autosomes are the regular chromosomes, so 1 to 22. So you have pairs of those. So 23 pairs of autosomes. They're homologous, so that means like you have a 1 and a 1, and you get one of them from your mom and one of them from your dad. Okay, so that you have two of the same thing, so they're both 1. So then you might have two, or you do have two of the 2s, one from your mom, one from your dad. Okay, so those are the autosomes, the first 22 pairs. So they control basic body functions, and then the 23rd pair is what's going to control sex. And there are some other important traits on that 23rd pair. So the 23rd pair, if you're diploid, that means you're 2N. Okay, so that means you have 2 times 23. So you have 46 chromosomes. Okay, if you're haploid, okay, that means you have 1N. Okay, so you have half the regular amount of chromosomes. Okay, so sex cells are haploid. I'm sure you've heard this all before. Okay, so now the role of the sex chromosomes is to determine whether you're male or female. So our cells contain 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 autosomes, 22 pairs of autosomes, and then the pair of sex chromosomes. Okay, the sex of the child is determined by the type of sperm that fertilizes the mother's egg. So that comes down to the male determines the sex of the baby, because the male could have X or Y in their sperm. Okay, so X sperm, all the eggs that the female makes are going to be X. Okay, because females can only be XX. So when she develops eggs, the eggs all have to have X. So it's up to the sperm to have X or Y to determine whether it's male. And like the early kings didn't realize that, so they were, well, there's no way they would have realized it, but they were cutting off their wives' heads because they weren't getting male babies, and it was their fault. Okay, now, sex cells are haploid. Okay, so they're N. That's how we would symbolize them. Okay, so to make them, we go through this process called meiosis. Okay, so meiosis is reduction division. So we're going from 2N to N. Okay, in meiosis, what are we trying to get? Okay, so we're trying to get daughter cells. Okay, so usually we end up with 4. Okay, 4 daughter cells. We'll end up with 23 chromosomes if everything goes normally. Now we have 2 things going on in meiosis that don't go on in mitosis, and that is 2 processes crossing over an independent assortment, and both of those lead to genetic recombination. Okay, so what happens is we'll have some genetic information exchanged when chromosomes line up, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so independent assortment, crossing over, these are 2 things that only occur in meiosis. Okay, and it allows for us to have genetic recombination. So like we don't all look like our siblings. Okay, we're not all exactly the same, even though our DNA is coming from the same place. Okay, now to go through meiosis, here's the terminology that you need to know. A replicated chromosome is a double-stranded chromosome. So here's an example. Okay, so of a replicated chromosome. So we have 2 copies of the genetic information. These 2 arms of it, okay, so like this and this, each one of them is called a sister chromatid. Okay, so we have sister chromatids, and they're connected by this thing called the centromere. Okay, genetic information can be exchanged between them, but in the beginning they are genetically identical. Okay, then when we have a pair of chromosomes, okay, this replicated chromosome splits. Okay, and then we have a maternal chromosome and a paternal chromosome. Okay, and here's where the centromere is. And then a single chromosome is here. Okay, so it's a single chromatid with the centromere on it. And the terminology, I wish they would have, when they originally named all this stuff, there should have been a better way, but they didn't do it it's not very clear, I don't think. Okay, so meiosis, there's two stages of meiosis. So there's meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Okay, so we go through meiosis 1 and then we go through meiosis 2. The stages of them are very similar to mitosis. Okay, so in the images in the book, the red chromosomes are going to be the maternal ones, so the chromosomes from the mom, and the blue ones are going to be from the dad. I don't know if I can get rid of. All right. So when you look at this, we're going to go through the same phases. So we'll have prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, as well as cytokinesis. Okay, now you have to remember meiosis is only occurring in the sex cells. Okay, so what happens here, okay, is we'll have replicated chromosomes. Okay, then we get to metaphase, and in metaphase, remember the chromosomes line up in the middle. Okay, you can see that some recombination has occurred. So we have parts of the red on the blue, parts of blue on the red. They understand exactly how that works. You don't need to memorize that. You just need to know it allows for genetic recombination, some genetic differences. Okay, so metaphase, the chromosomes line up in the middle. Anaphase, we're going to separate. Okay, and then telophase, the cells will actually separate, and then we'll end up with two cells that have 23 replicated chromosomes. Okay, now meiosis 2, what's going to happen is we're going to go through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase again. But what's going to happen is we're going to separate the sister chromatids. Okay, so we'll have them separated, so they're going to get ready for replication, or get ready for separation, right? We form the spindle fibers, the centrioles move to the ends. Okay, they line up in the middle. Okay, and then the sister chromatids are going to separate. Okay, and the cells, we end up with 4 haploid, so 1 N, daughter cells. Okay, so if we are 46, we're going to end up with 23. Okay. All right, so sometimes, I thought I took the slide out. Sometimes we don't have, the chromosomes don't separate properly. Okay, and we have what's called non-disjunction. So non-disjunction can lead to an abnormal number of chromosomes. So in this case, this is Down syndrome. Okay, so in Down syndrome, the 21st chromosome doesn't separate. So we end up with 24 chromosomes in the gamete and 22 in another gamete. Okay, so one of them doesn't have enough and one of them has one too many. So Down syndrome is an extra 21st chromosome, so it occurs from this non-disjunction. So something goes wrong in meiosis, okay, is what the problem is. It can happen in other chromosomes, but the other chromosomes might contain so much information that the trisomy is actually lethal. So it can only happen and produce a viable egg if and a viable embryo if it's one of the smaller chromosomes. So the bigger chromosomes this doesn't happen with because it's a lethal mutation. Okay, so I'm going to stop here.